Check out Paddy's Rewards Club. Simply place 5 bets of £10 or more across any sport in a week, and you'll get a free £10 bet then next week. T&Cs apply. 18+. BeGambleAware.org.
Hi there, I'm Nick Watts, and welcome to this special Six Nations Postcast. If you like your rugby, don't go anywhere for the next half an hour or so, as we've got best bets for the whole tournament. Joining us in the studio, we've got Graham Woods from the Racing Post. In the centre, we've got Stuart Riley, Scottish aficionado, and on the line we've got Darren Jordan from our sponsors Paddy Power. Good morning, gents, and good morning, Darren.
Hey there, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thanks. If you could start us off by giving us a rundown of the prices for the outright markets for this year's Six Nations.
Absolutely. So Ireland are just shades of odds on at 5-6, England at 3-1, Wales at 9-2, Scotland at 10-1, France at 18-1, and poor Italy at 500-1. And
Darren, sticking with you, you're obviously Irish, you want them to win, but do you think they will?
I don't, actually. I think Wales are the value bet this year. Similar case to Ireland last year, they're going away to France in their first game, and if they can win that, they're going to have some momentum for the rest of the tournament. Closing it up against Ireland in the last game, Warren Gatland's the only coach with a winning record over Joe Smith, so I think Wales are the best bet in the outright.
And Graham, going to you, we've got a bit of negativity there from Darren, but you go back to 2018, and Ireland had an absolutely fantastic year, won the Six Nations, won in Australia away, beat New Zealand in the autumn. There's no weaknesses, are there?
It's hard to pick holes. I mean, like you say, they lost one match in the whole of 2018. That was the first match in the series against Australia, and they won the series 2-1, beat the All Blacks. I mean, England, how did they feel coming off the field at Twickenham? You know, just got beaten by New Zealand, thought, yeah, well, it's not that bad, and then Ireland showed them how it's done the following week. You've got to really have a feel for it more than looking at the stats, though. Ireland have got to go and do it all again. It's not a question of just carrying on. They've got to win all 5 games. Winning 5 games in the sort of white-hot atmosphere of the Six Nations is a tough ask, and I wouldn't back any team at odds-on to do that. I think Ireland have got the best chance of doing it, certainly, but I wouldn't be hugely confident in backing them at a short price to do it.
And Stuart, what about you? What's your view of Ireland? No team managed to beat them last season. Australia did once, but of course they won the series. So if you're playing Ireland, they built up a kind of aura around themselves, haven't they? And they're still going to be hard to beat.
They absolutely do have this aura. They're the best team in the Northern Hemisphere. They're a very tough prospect to face. I think one of the things that Graham alluded to there, it took a incredible drop goal right at the last for their first game against France in this tournament last year. They started slowly again down in Australia. This has become a bit of a theme in recent years, and that would be my worry, given that their first game is England at the Aviva. Aviva's become a real fortress for them, but that match is going to be absolutely massive as far as Ireland are concerned. If they win that, then, you know, everything is on. But they tend to start slightly slowly, or they've got this ability to start slowly, and if they do that against England, then the whole tournament is blown wide open.
And being traditionally slow starters, Ireland, they've got no margin for error this time, Graham, because they face England first up, and then they've got to go to Murrayfield in the next start. It's not like having Italy second up as they did last season.
That's true. I mean, I'd be a bit more confident about Ireland in their opener, because I think they've got more continuity to their side. They're a bit more settled. England are always having to deal with injuries, and it's always different players. So they're moving around a bit from the autumn. But I think those 2 away games, Scotland won't be easy at Murrayfield, and I think Cardiff for the final round. We've seen what Wales do. They build and build through the tournament, and England won't need reminding what it's like when they went there in 2013 and got blown away in round 5. That'll be Warren Gatland's last Six Nations match. The atmosphere there will be incredible. Wales will be fired up. I think that could be Ireland's toughest test.
Okay, well, that's Ireland done and dusted. Darren, moving to England now, they obviously have to go to Ireland first game on Saturday. England were pretty poor in last season's championship. They kind of had a resurgence of sorts in the autumn, and there's no pressure on them going to Ireland. Does that make them dangerous this weekend?
Yeah, I think so. I think Eddie Jones will be happy that they're going to Ireland in the first game. As the guys were alluding to, Ireland have started the last 2 Six Nations slowly. They lost away to Scotland 2 years ago, needed a last-minute drop goal against France last year. I just think the issue with the England squad is when you compare it to the Ireland squad, there's about 2 or 3 places on the Ireland team that you don't know who's going to be playing. Whereas for the England squad, there's only about 2 or 3, maybe 4 that you do know: Davuna Polas, Itoje and Farrell. But apart from that, there's no one you can kind of say he will definitely start. And I think that's a huge issue, especially going into a World Cup year. You'd expect them to have a bit more continuity in their side than that.
And Graham, England, they got the Vunipolas back. They might not have them for the whole tournament because they're very injury prone, but having them back at the moment is obviously a huge boost for them going into the tournament.
It is a big boost. We talked about it last year when Billy Vunipola was out and what a huge loss he is. But I mean, don't forget, England are having to constantly chop and change. You know, they coped quite well in the autumn with a different back row. Now some of those players who did well in the autumn, like Sam Underhill, are injured. Billy Vunipola's back in. So it's quite hard for Eddie Jones to settle on a side. And there are a lot of issues. I think that we'll find out more when the team's named. But who's going to be the 10-12? I understand Ben Teo's injured, so I think that's someone he would have liked to go for. It's difficult for England, this kind of start. I think this is going to be a tight game. I think Ireland will probably edge it. And England have got then tough trips to Cardiff, where they haven't done well. And I don't think England will be in the top 2 come the end.
And Stuart, England, they really kind of went downhill for the majority of last year. They did kind of gather themselves in the autumn and they did much better. Was that a false dawn, or do you think they've reached the bottom and they're on the way back up now?
I'd say it's a bit of both. I think that there was not quite as much promise in the autumn as people have sort of latched onto, but at the same time, it's hard for them to get much worse than they were last season. You know, England started so incredibly well under Eddie Jones, and sort of all the air seemed to come out of the balloon last year. It was a very odd performance. There was more credibility in their autumn performances, and they've kind of developed into this just great, big, lumbering, powerful, but fairly one-dimensional team. You know, they've got these massive ball carriers in the pack. You know, individuals like Tio Tuolangi, Kokanasinga, they really are building a team around a power rugby game. And obviously, you know, in Six Nations conditions, I can see that being effective, and it's a decent fallback when things aren't quite going your way. But I think, you know, you look at the Six Nations outright betting market, England, Ireland and Wales are the 3 at the top of the betting, and they've got to go away to both those teams that are fancied to go well in the tournament. And that's a really big ask in this tournament.
Darren, going to the Welsh, I think most people looking ahead to this tournament would say they're the biggest dangers to Ireland, could possibly win it. If they get through this opening game against France, then they've got Italy second up, which you think would be a banker, and it really builds them nicely into the tournament. So do you take it that way as well, that they're the biggest dangers to Ireland and could win this?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been able to come in under the radar the last year or so because Ireland have been in such good form. But Wales themselves have won 9 on the bounce. It's Gatland's last Six Nations, so their club form, Welsh clubs have always struggled, but when it comes to the Six Nations, it doesn't make a difference. They're always able to step up to the plate, and as you said, they have a nice run. If they can get that win away to France in the first game, they're kind of set up to bring it to Cardiff in the last game against Ireland. And if they have something on the line in that game, I'd really fancy them for it.
Graham, your view on the Welsh, they've obviously on a very good run. I think it's 9 in succession that they've won. It's one of the dangers that Gatland maybe doesn't know his best team. They've chopped and changed at 10 and 15 quite a lot.
I think he knows his best team, but they're not all available. And he's looking to develop the kind of depth that Ireland have got and England have got. And certainly team selection will be an issue because there's a lot of injuries. Faletau's the big one. We don't have Lee Halfpenny is going to be fit. We don't have Ross Moriarty is going to be fit as a backup to Faletau. But Wales are, I think, a team more than anyone who thrive on confidence and continuity and building on wins and just building up steam. And they showed that in 2013. They lost their first match. It was at home to Ireland, but they went and dug out and won in France, won ugly. Didn't concede a try in the next 4 matches, and we said thrashed England in the kind of the decider at the end. So it is a tough start away to France, but they've won 2 out of the last 3 there. The one they lost 2 years ago was the one that ended in sort of 3 hours into overtime, whatever it was. So they're building, they're confident, and they're going under the radar, as Darren said. And that's exactly what Warren Gatland likes. He likes the fact that Joe Schmidt and Eddie Jones are having all the verbals and he can just get on with it. This time last year, you know, their opener was at home to Scotland. Everyone was talking up Scotland, what a huge challenge they were going to make. And actually, Wales won pretty comfortably, and Gatland said, well, suits us fine, we know what we're doing, everyone can talk about everyone else, we're going to get on with it. that's the kind of mood in the Welsh camp, and that's what puts a lot of confidence in me.
Stuart, they had a great 2018 Wales. They got the monkey off the back with Australia, beating them in the autumn. So nothing to fear for them. They can go into this tournament with, like Graham said, a lot of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they've got a very strong starting 15. They're in good form. They've got a decent run of fixtures. That France game first up, as everyone has said, is going to be absolutely crucial to their challenge. I think the thing with the Wales squad that you look at, and it just doesn't have the same depth to it. One or two crucial injuries and that can derail their campaign. And when you look at what a sort of brutal physical confrontation Six Nations rugby is, you're going to pick up a few injuries through the tournament, and the key to them is it not happening to key individuals within that team. They've got some seriously talented players. You know, you look at how much of the Lions squad has been based on the Wales squad in recent tours, and obviously there's a Gatland element there, but a huge chunk of the backbone to those sides has been based on the Wales team. There's some fantastic players in a European sense, and you know their starting 15 is as good as any out there.
I'm going to stick with you, Stuart, because before we came on, you told me you were 3/4 Scottish. Is that right?
Yes.
So you can tell us about the Scottish angle here. This is going to be, I think, for all the teams. Obviously, the Six Nations is crucial in the World Cup year, but Scotland have a real opportunity to do something here, don't they? With 3 home games, they've been on the fringes. They can win at home. They haven't been able to win away, but they're kind of getting there slowly. Is this the year? Is this the tournament where they really reach their peak?
I would love to say yes. Sort of as a Scotland fan, you're always filled with the hope, and every year you're thinking, oh, you know, we're improving, this can be our year. It's such a tough competition this year. 1 or 2 key injuries that Scotland are carrying into the tournament can make a big difference to their chances. We've got such a strong developing squad. You know, the loss of Hamish Watson, I think, is going to be a big blow. But we've got some very, very talented players.
And a lovely way to start. If you could have picked the fixtures, home to Italy first up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way into the tournament. The back line is starting to buzz. They're starting to get some depth to the pack as well. Like, there's a lot to be very excited about this Scotland team. And the fact is, I'm not quite sure they can string 5 games together to win the tournament, but they absolutely will cause upsets in this tournament. They will beat, I reckon they'll beat at least one of the big 3. And then, you know, they're sort of the team that I don't see them winning the tournament, but they're going to decide the tournament by upsetting one of the big 3.
And Graham, the problem for Scotland, Murrayfield has turned into a fortress for them, but when they go away from home, they seem to go missing. They did against Wales last year. They've got to beat, they've got to go to England, they've got to go to France.
They've never won in the Six Nations.
So how do you see them going? Same again?
I think, like you said, I mean, to put some context on that sort of view that their home form's much better, they've beaten all 5 other teams at home in the last 2 tournaments. In the whole history of the Six Nations, they've played 48 away matches. They've won 7 of them. 5 of those were in Italy. So, and they did it again in the autumn. You know, they went to Wales again, and they lost that one quite badly. So they've got to get it together on the road. There's no doubt about that. And of the visitors, Italy, yes, you'd think they'd win, but Wales and Ireland, we're talking about them as possibly being the top 2, fighting it out. So those aren't straightforward at all. And they won both of those fixtures 2 years ago when they had Wales and Ireland at home. I think there was not exactly complacency, but I think Scotland were a little underestimated even as recently as that. And that's certainly not going to be the case this time. And I think it's going to be tough for them. I'd say maybe 2 wins, but I can't see more than that.
And Darren, what's your view of the Scots? Ireland have got to go there amongst other teams. Is it going to be a similar story when they're strong at home and weak away?
Yeah, absolutely. Any away trip to Murrayfield could be tough for any team, but the Scottish the club teams have been going very well. They're in both Edinburgh and Glasgow into the quarterfinals in the Champions Cup, which is huge for them. Just with the Scotland team, they try to play a real fast tempo. That's what Gregor Townsend wants. He wants them to play the quickest rugby in the world. But they have Greg Laidlaw on 9, and I just think that's a glaring contradiction. If you want to play fast rugby, you need to have someone like Ali Price in there instead. Laidlaw's just got to slow it down. He doesn't click well with Finn Russell. I just think that's Scotland's main weak link. If Greg Ladle actually got injured, I think it would be huge for Scotland. I think that would actually make them a better team, so they'd be able to play to their game plan.
Now, Graham, turning to France, it's one of the biggest cliches in sport about their unpredictability, but I'm sitting here now 3 days before the tournament. I don't know what to expect. What can we expect from the French?
We're not going to call them mercurial. We're not going to say which French team will turn up, and then we say it because you just can't get away from it. And this is a team who started 2018 under a new coach. No one knew what was going to happen. He'd only been in his job 2 weeks, and they came closest to beating Ireland of any team. And it was an incredible comeback for Ireland to make that first win. And they ended the year losing at home to Fiji. I think the France team sort of reflects their league. It reflects the top 14, where we see there's obviously a lot of flair, there's a lot of brilliance in the top 14, but there's a lot of slow, lumbering rugby. It's very gritty. It's a real grind sometimes. And in the first sort of decade, if you like, of this century, perhaps that's the way rugby was. It was about defences, it was about big packs, but things have moved on. New Zealand have kind of led the way, and it showed that you win things by scoring tries, by taking chances. And the Six Nations is catching up. The last couple of years we've seen more tries than in the past. And I think France are still stuck in their rut. So when it suits them, when they've got the conditions or the opposition, they'll fashion a win. But I think they're being a bit left behind.
And Stuart, the French, just noticed before we came on that Bastereau is not in the French squad for Friday night, and they're going with, made me feel very old actually, a 19-year-old called Romain Ntamack. I remember his father Emile playing for France many moons ago. So maybe a subtle change of emphasis there, not going with the battering rams, in the centre, maybe a bit more traditional French guile and flair, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I found quite interesting looking at France for this tournament, because there are elements there that you can get quite excited about. They've got some talented young players like Romain Ntamack coming through. They've got a young prop coming through as well, whose name is just escaping me at the moment, Demba Bamba. And the two of them won the Under-20 Rugby World Cup for France last year. They're very exciting young players coming through. France's away record is shocking. I think the run of away defeats, it's like 7 or 8 in a row, something like that. They've lost 16 of their last 19 away matches. So obviously home games are going to be key, but I think one of the big issues with this France team is you look down the squad and you can't nail down too many positions. You're not entirely sure who's going to be starting at 9, who's going to be starting at 10. You look through that back line and wings, fullback, you're looking at their team and you're thinking, I could see a completely different team in round 5 to round 1. There aren't too many players in there that have absolutely stamped their name on the shirt, and that allows them to take chances, give young players an opportunity, and someone can come in and absolutely set the world on fire. We saw that with Teddy Thomas last year. Absolutely unbelievable player. He's going to be a big loss in this tournament. And I look at that squad and it's less which France is going to turn up for me this year. It's who is going to turn up to play for France. I don't actually look at that squad and think, oh yeah, I can see how this tournament's going to pan out for them. It could go one of a million ways.
And Darren, what about you? They almost put a spoke in your Grand Slam wheel first up last season, but then they had a mediocre campaign. What on earth do you do? How do you treat a team like France when you're approaching this tournament, from a betting angle as much as anything else?
You expect them to turn up at home, but when they go away, you kind of factor in their poor record there. As you alluded to, Bastereau's been left out, and I think that's the signal of intent in how France want to play. Toulouse have been going very well in the Champions Cup in top 14, and they've had a bit of the old French flair. Few of the players are named in the team, UJ, Medard, Ntamack, but they haven't included Antoine Dupont, the scrum half. They've gone with Morgan Parra instead. And I think similar to the Scotland team, that's a mistake. Dupont brings that quick tempo that they need to play that game. And also, I think the forecast for this Friday isn't the best. So playing this expansive rugby might not be the best idea against Wales. That could go into a bit of a grind, and they don't really have the players picked for for a grind, I think.
Now, Graham, last but by no means least, we do have to discuss the Italians. We're all expecting them probably to struggle again. Sergio Parise, fantastic player, but I think he's the losing most captain in rugby history, which is unfortunate for him. Can they do anything? Will they be targeting a particular game where we think we might have a chance here? Because they're not going to win the tournament, but they can maybe upset one of the other teams. Do you see them doing that?
When Italy play at their best, it's usually their first match at home, which they haven't got this year. Scotland away is going to be a tough start. I mean, I feel desperately for Conor O'Shea. He's doing so much good work with Italy, and he's brought them on so much. You know, they're scoring tries. They're not just going out and thinking damage limitation every time. They're playing well. They're putting, moves together. But I think everyone else is moving ahead at an even faster rate. So, he's moving forwards step by step, but getting further and further behind, if you like. And don't forget, his job is overall sort of supremo of Italian rugby. So he's looking after the clubs at Benetton and Zebre, and Benetton doing well in the Pro 14. So there's definite progress being made. They're scoring more tries, although unfortunately Matteo Minozzi is one of the finds of the season last year. Their fullback had a tremendous season. I think he was actually nominated for Player of the Tournament. He's injured, which is a great shame. But I would like to see them do well. I'd like to see them sort of take chances and attack. I don't think they'll win a game. If they do, well, we'll talk about individual matches later. Maybe France at home last up if the French have kind of lost their way. I think that's their best chance. Stuart,
it's important that Italy do put up some resistance in these games, isn't it? Otherwise it's going to be a long, hard winter for them again on the back of several difficult winters. Graham mentioned France last game at home as a potential upset. Do you see them? Do you see that as the best chance of winning a game this season? Do you think they could surprise Scotland on Saturday? They almost did at home last season, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting earlier this week. I think it was Greg Laylor said, Scotland are the one team that Italy always think they've got a chance against. So I think they'll be very up for that game. As Graham also said, I think the Italy-France game at the end of the tournament could be, to use a racing expression, their Gold Cup. That could be the game that from the beginning they're targeting. You've got the distinct possibility that by the time round 5 comes round, France are out of contention. There's a lack of motivation in the French squad. I've already mentioned how poorly they travel. It's in Rome, and that could be the game that they're targeting from the beginning of the tournament and going, right, we'll give everything we've got against Scotland. We don't really expect to beat the big three, and we are gonna look at that France game, and that's the game we're going to try and peak for, because Italy have often petered out of these tournaments. And I think the thing with Italy and the problem that they're going to find now, because this tournament has become so competitive, teams have worked out that if there isn't a Grand Slam, it's going to come down to points difference, and they need to unload on Italy to try and rack up and get their points difference as big as possible in that one game. So then you just need to focus on playing Test match rugby in the others, and that's going to be where these matches are sort of can be very tough on Italy. They tend to hold their own for the first 60 minutes and then wilt, and it will be interesting to see if they're able to sort of push teams deeper into matches, keep games close, then teams just have to close the game out. If they get into a situation where teams can just rack up and go for bonus points on them, it could be a very long Six Nations for Italy.
Darren, would you agree with the boys? Would you say France in the final game is Italy's best chance of getting some points on the board this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking through all the games there, and obviously, seeing as I've priced them up myself, it's hard to say, that one's wrong. But that's the one that I came to and said, well, if France are out of the tournament and Italy will be all guns blazing for that one, they'll want to bring some kind of momentum towards the World Cup. So that was the one game that I identified as a potential upset on the cards there. As Graham alluded to, Minozzi is a huge loss for them. He scored 3 tries, I think, in the last Six Nations. And he just brought that bit of flair to their backline. Michele Campagnaro is back for them. He was missing for the last Six Nations campaign. He's a huge player for them as well, so he can step up to the plate there. But I think Sergio Parise is kind of, he's getting old now. He's not the influential figure that he once was. There is some good players in the back line like Negri who will be able to come up with big moments, but I just don't think they'll have enough and they'll get blown away, I'm afraid.
Well, we're going to go to a break, and after that we're going to come back and talk about some of the games.
Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is ThePaddyPower, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather or the gym.
We got a mouth-watering clash on Saturday tea time in Dublin with Ireland facing England. Darren, could you give us the prices, please?
Yeah, sure. The handicap's currently Ireland -9, evens either side. Their handicap draw is 16-1, while the match odds are Ireland are 3-10, England are 3-1, and the draw is 22-1.
Darren, how would you play this game? Do you think it's a comfortable home win? Do you think it's going to be difficult? Do you think it being close, or do you think the Irish tide will roll England over?
I've been humming and hawing about this one a bit. I think the handicap looks about right to me. I think, as we've alluded to, Ireland can start the Six Nations slowly, but just England's form isn't what. I just don't think they'll have enough coming into this game without a strong 15 that they know will do the job. I think Ireland will just about edge this game here.
Graham, English team very much going as underdogs to Dublin. They haven't been able to lay a glove on Ireland for the previous few seasons. But do you think that allows them to play with a bit of freedom? Everyone will be writing them off. Does that make them dangerous? And could you see a potential upset, or is it an easy home win for you?
I don't think it's an easy home win. And I looked at that handicap. That's the biggest handicap England have had in Dublin. And it seemed very big. Now, it depends on how they play it. I mean, you say, well, will they chance their arm? I don't think they will. I think this has always been a tight clash. The last 3 matches have seen something like 2 tries in total, both scored by Ireland, incidentally. But the first round of the tournament, everyone's finding their way a bit. There's the big emphasis on defence, and the first round is about not throwing it away. The 5th round, final round, might be all about getting your 4 tries or whatever, but the first round is about standing firm, about defence. Joe Schmidt was quite interesting. I was hearing him talking at the Six Nations launch about what a successful year Ireland had, and he said, well, yeah, but in the last quarter of matches, we threw it away. We conceded soft tries to England. And I think when that's his main concern going into a match, you get that feeling that's where the focus is going to be. It's going to be on tightening up in defence, holding out for 80 minutes. I see this as a low-scoring game, which could make a 9-point handicap look big. But because the Ireland side is so much more settled, and I think England are going to be just a little bit shaky footing, I'd go for an Ireland win by, say, 1 to 12 points.
And Stuart, going to you, England defence coach John Mitchell being a bit naughty this week, saying Ireland are going to bore England into submission. They've got their tactics, but they work very well. They're very hard to defend against. And again, do you see this as a home banker, or do you think England can go over there and do something?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. As much as Ireland's defence is incredibly effective at nullifying
They shut
opposition.
New Zealand out.
They shut New Zealand out. I mean, they scored vastly more points in last year's Six Nations than anyone else. So, to sort of call them boring, they're great with the ball. Their defence is arguably makes the other team look boring because they just completely shut them down. I think the thing with this game is going into this match, it kind of feels like it's a very pivotal game for Ireland in terms of if they're gonna win the Grand Slam, then this England first up. We've talked about slow starts before. It's a win at all costs game. This they've got to win it, and that will be the focus. I don't see them sort of go, we'll rack up on England. I don't see that being the case at all. I think 9 is a very, very generous line, and so I would be siding with England on the handicap. I think Ireland at home, that squad, that depth, I think they probably edge it. But I mean, as we said earlier,
similar to Graham, 1 to 12 points.
Yeah, I mean the thing with it is I can see England causing an upset given how slowly Ireland have started in the past. So I would be backing England on the handicap.
Okay. Now, Darren,
I just think there as well. A really interesting stat is that England actually haven't scored in the Viva Stadium since 2013. So I think that's why this handicap is near double figures, because if Ireland can nullify England's attack, Ireland will be able to get the points and they could pull away.
The Darren, we kick off in France on Friday night with the French versus Wales match. That must have been a hard one to set the handicap for.
Yeah, it kind of, we're sitting on the fence a bit. We've made it a scratch game, so it's evens either side in both the match and the handicap market, and the draw is 14-1. So that kind of just points towards, so we expect it to be a really, really tough game, a bit of a grind. The Weatherford Pass isn't great, so it could just get into a bit of a kicking battle. I wouldn't be surprised to see a really low score line here, maybe something under 20 points. Yeah, that's what I'm predicting in that one.
And Graham, what about you? Do the Welsh go and win in Paris, or is it going to be tricky for them?
I'd fancy them to go and win it. I'd echo everything Darren said. I think it has the makings of a real grind and a tough game. I don't think that will bother Wales. Like we said before, they have won 2 of the last 3 and were very unlucky to lose that one 2 years ago. And then they've got the incentive of going off. I think they're going off to the south of France to prepare there before heading to Italy. So they're putting a lot of store in this game. I think they're really, really focused. Every ex-Wales international you hear on the radio saying, yeah, if we beat France, we win the Grand Slam. They've got all eyes on this game. And I think the intensity and focus they bring to it could just edge it for them.
Sure, a massive carrot for Wales in the fact that they play Italy second. So as Graham said, putting a lot of store in this match. Do they win this and win the second game and go right through the tournament?
It's tough. I think, I don't know. I don't know if they do win it. I think France are a different proposition at home. I think that as much as we've talked about everyone else really being up for it, targeting their first game, France are going to be doing exactly the same thing. You know, they've been a powerhouse of European rugby, especially at club level for a long time, and the international team has sort of been overlooked, maybe left behind. And I think the fact they're going to have weather conditions in their favour for playing that big, dominant pack and slow, effective rugby. They draw penalties, they kick well. They've got a number of good kickers, so whoever's on kicking duty will keep them in the game. And I can see France really pushing Wales close, and I can actually see them winning this.
Darren, the final game of the weekend is Scotland and Italy. That's all about the handicap line, isn't it? What have you set it for Scotland?
Yeah, so Scotland are 24 points favourites in this one. Again, I think it sounds about right. If I was looking for a bet in this market, though, I'd be looking towards the first half handicap and maybe looking at the Italy plus there. As we've kind of mentioned, they come out strong and tend to fade in the latter stages of both the games and the tournament. So if I were looking for an angle there, I'd be backing the Italy plus in the first half handicap.
Graham, somebody puts some money in your hand and gives you a bet on the handicap. Would you go with Scotland to cover that 24 points, or would you go with Italy to defend that?
I'm leaning towards Italy on the handicap, although Darren's play at the half-time handicap is actually, that sounds a very sound move as well. I mean, it's a big handicap for Scotland to cover. Obviously, their attacking game has stepped up. They've only beaten Italy by more than that. I think once. They won 29-0 2 seasons ago. Now, can I see Italy being nilled again? I don't think I can. They've opened their game up, and they're playing with more kind of flair and less pressure to defend, if you like. And so, I mean, they've only got to get 15 points on the board, which is about the average in Scotland. Have got to get 40 to cover that line. So I would go for Italy on the handicap there.
And Stuart, sometimes your eyes light up when you see Italy, you're playing Italy as a punter, and you think, well, Scotland will put loads of points on them. They have to get into the tournament. But it doesn't always work out that way. So would you be plus 24 or, you know, for Scotland, or would you be in Italy's camp?
I think I would be in Italy's camp on the handicap for 2 reasons. Firstly, I mean, there was only 2 points in the reverse fixture in Rome last year. And Scotland came into last year's Six Nations with a wave of positivity behind them and absolutely flopped out the gates. So I think the most important thing for Scotland is everyone wants Italy and everyone wants to rack up on Italy, but I actually think first up, you need to win. You need to win your first match. And so I think Scotland will be focusing on winning the game more so than they'll be focusing on we need to rack up points on Italy because we need to boost our point difference. And I just, to me, I can see them not covering the line vastly more than I can see them covering it. They can do it, they're capable of it. They've got some great backs and a lot of talent out there. But first up, Six Nations, the pressure that they're under, the expectation, I think they take a very practical approach, and I probably think they don't cover 24 points now.
Okay. Now, Darren, moving on to round two, just picking out what looks to be the pick of the fixtures. It's Scotland against Ireland. Don't know if you've got prices for that at this stage. Have you got prices for the later rounds of games?
Yeah, we do. We have all 15 games priced up. So for that Scotland-Ireland game, Ireland are going over to Murrayfield 6-point favourites. In the match odds, they're 4-9 with Scotland 2-1. As you said, I think that's going to be a huge game for Ireland. They're going over there after losing there two years ago, so they're going to be looking to right that wrong. I think Graham mentioned earlier that Hamish Watson's out, and he's going to be a huge loss. Maybe not so much in this Scotland-Italy match, but he's going to be a huge loss in these big tight games there when you can get in the turnovers, you can get that quick ball for Scotland.
Graham, Scotland-Ireland, again, Ireland came unstuck 2 seasons ago at Murrayfield. Who do you see winning this game, and is there a bet that we could profit from in it?
I quite fancy Ireland to do a job in this one. I mean, I remember that game 2 years ago. I tipped Ireland. I was watching the beginning of it, and the Scotland scrum was going backwards. And I thought, this is all over. And somehow Scotland came back into it, and they played very well. I'm not taking anything away from them. But Ireland, I think, will just have a bit too much power and precision. And then their kicking game will fund a lot of territory. And Scotland are missing a lot of forwards from their pack. And if you look in the autumn, they lost at home to South Africa. They were really outmuscled by the South African pack. And don't forget, Wales and England both beat South Africa at home. It wasn't a great Springbok team. And I think when they're up against really powerful packs with a sense of purpose and a strong game plan, I think they could come unstuck.
So would you say an Irish win, maybe a 1 to 12 points, that kind of thing?
I seem to always tip 1 to 12 points. I always seem to tip narrow ones. I think they could go. It was a 6-point handicap to it. I think they could win by more than a score, definitely.
Stuart, what about you, Scotland, Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, as Graham says, Scotland's main weakness is when they come up against big, powerful packs. But, I think the game that I hark back to for this, it kind of has the feel in Scotland's programme of being their version of the Calcutta Cup match from last year's tournament. Obviously, England was always the big game for Scotland, but that comes at the end of the tournament, and it's at Twickenham this year. This is sort of a massive match at Murrayfield that they can really be up for. And that game against England last year, they absolutely deserved to win that. It was a hell of a performance. They've got that in them. I think Ireland's 6 points on the road. I like Scotland for this tournament. I think they're going to do well. I can see them upsetting one of these teams. So in that sense, I think having 6 points in your favour is, I might be siding with Scotland, but at the same time, Ireland are such a strong team, and it's going to be very hard. I would probably side with Scotland in this situation, but as you can probably guess, I'm sitting on the fence here slightly. It's not a bullish confidence.
That's fair enough. Let's go to round 3, Darren. I think the pick of the fixtures in this round looks to be Wales against England. England won at Twickenham last season, but not by much. There was a debated try that Wales did or didn't score. They weren't far away. With home advantage, do you think the Welsh will win this time?
Yeah, Wales are 3-point favourites for this game. If I were to back either side of that, I think it would be Wales. If they've got off to a nice start against France and then Italy, they have the week gap in between this, so they can get backfield up for this one nicely. And if I were to have a free bet there, I'd be backing the -3.
And Graham, how do you see this going?
Well, I've said I fancy Wales. This will be their first home game, which is always big for them, and obviously a lot will change in the first 2 rounds. We'll see, but England have won the last 2 in Cardiff, but I think they left it late last time they were there, didn't they? They were being well beaten until the final 5 minutes. And Wales will come at them strong. I would fancy Wales here, yeah.
Stuart, you said that you possibly saw an upset with England going to Dublin at the weekend. They've got to go to Cardiff after that. It's not easy for them, but do you see another upset here, or do you see you taking it as a home win?
No, I don't. I see Wales winning this, and I see Wales winning this one quite comfortably. I think one of the things that's quite interesting, you go back to that game at Twickenham last year, I'm just looking at the Wales back line that day. Obviously, Wales lost the game, but they had Rhys Patchell at 10, they had Steph Evans and Josh Adams on the wing. They had Gareth Anscombe at fullback. That is a makeshift backline of, and they'll be putting out a much stronger team against England this year, and I think that they'll have too much for them, especially at home. And sort of either way the first weekend goes, if they beat France and they're on a roll, they become an intimidating opponent. If they lose to France, and then this becomes their tournament really. Like if they lose the first 2 games, they are out of it. So either way, it's going to be a big match for Wales, and I can see them delivering. I think they cover that handicap quite comfortably.
Darren, going to round 4, Scotland-Wales looks as though it's going to be a cracker. If Wales are still, 3 out of 3 at that stage, they probably won't fancy a trip to Murrayfield. It certainly won't be easy. How have you got the betting and the handicap on that match?
Yeah, really interesting tie, this one. Scotland are currently 1-point favourites, but I expect that handicap to kind of adjust as the tournament goes on. See, if Wales have won their first 3 games, they'll probably go off favourites there. So that's definitely one to kind of keep an eye on.
Graham, it's really difficult to judge sitting here, a few weeks away from this particular game, because often it will all depend on how each team got on in their first 3 rounds. But looking at it at this stage, Scotland-Wales, would you expect Wales to be too strong for Scotland, or would you see that as a real banana skin for the Welsh?
I suppose I could sit on the fence and say both, but we talked about Wales' injuries. I think a lot of players will be coming back, so I'd expect Wales to get stronger as the tournament goes on. Players like Lee Halfpenny, who's got a concussion issue, well, that's just a matter of time, really, isn't it? And so they will get stronger, I'm pretty sure, even if they do slip up in France. They've got a real sort of drive in them to get better. So at this stage, I probably would back Wales, and then we'll just have to see, we might be on a sort of value bet if the handicap goes significantly the other way.
And Stuart, what would you expect to happen in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I can see Scotland winning this game. I think it's the sort of matchup that quite suits Scotland. I know Wales absolutely humped them out of sight at the Principality Stadium first up last year, but I think Scotland at Murrayfield are a very different proposition, as we said.
And that will hurt them, what happened last season, because they just didn't. They never turned up for that whole game, did they?
They weren't on the pitch. And what's interesting as well is the 2 teams have a very similar sort of progression through the tournament. They both play Italy very early, so they first and second up, they're playing Italy. So it's not the tournament then becomes quite attritional for both teams. It's one of those whereby, like, if you get Italy round 3 or round 4, you kind of get a bit of a break. That's what happens for Ireland, and you can get some squad rotation in, freshen some people up, and actually this is gonna, I think what's gonna decide this game, and it's why it's hard to comment on now, is injuries will have a huge impact on these games, because these are 2 of the squads that starting 15s are excellent, but they maybe lack some of the depth of Ireland and England. So much of what's happened before in terms of injuries is going to play a factor in this match. So I wouldn't really want to call it either way. If they were playing first week up at Murrayfield, I would fancy Scotland.
Okay. Now, Darren, round 5, we all like to see a blockbuster, a Grand Slam decider. We don't always get one, but if there is to be one this season, it might well come in the shape of Wales and Ireland if they can get through the first 4 matches unscathed. That still looks a very good game on its own right anyway. Wales, Ireland, what have you got the line at? Yeah,
so the line's currently at Ireland -3. As we've kind of mentioned with the other games, it's hard to call this far out who will be playing for what, but in the scenario that Wales are playing for a Six Nations or playing for a Grand Slam even, you'd probably be backing the +3 there, just because Wales and Cardiff, they're another beast there. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But yeah, if I would have a bet this far out, I'd probably be backing the Wales +3, seeing as I do like them for the title.
And Graham, as we go to round 5, the Wales-Ireland match, do you expect either of those teams to have won their first 4 games, or do you think this is a match for the Six Nations rather than the Grand Slam decider?
The tricky one there, I suppose, to call is the opener for Wales in France. But we could end up with a scenario. I mentioned 2013 earlier, where Wales lost their first game, won the next 3, England won all 4. So it was a Grand Slam on the line for England, the title for Wales. And we could see a similar thing then. I mean, it depends. I'd be interested to see, because I thought Wales were huge value that day to beat England, because England was such an artificially short price because of all the Grand Slam money. I don't know if Ireland have been that well backed this year that we'll be able to pick up a good price about the home win. I don't know. I get the feeling there's a lot of money for Wales as well in the outright, so perhaps that won't distort the match betting so much. Wales at home, final game, I think you'd always fancy them, and I think they could win that, but obviously we've got a long way to go before then.
And Stuart?
At the end of the day, I mean, Wales are interesting, and like we said with the previous round of matches, this all comes down to squad depth, really, at this stage. Ireland do have a deeper squad than Wales. I don't think anyone's disputing that, and I think that moves me in Ireland's favour. Like, obviously, if we get to this point and we haven't had injuries, it's a completely different kettle of fish. But realistically, I'm expecting there to be some injuries by this stage. I think Ireland have the deeper squad of the two. The point Graham made earlier about the fact that Wales are sort of getting reinforcements throughout this tournament could be the thing that swings it back in Wales' favour, in that players like Lee Halfpenny could be back for this game whilst not being available at the start. It all ends up to you going round and round in circles. It's very hard to comment this far off. I think Ireland are the better team, and I think they've got the deeper squad. So if you make me decide now, I'll side with Ireland. But yeah, I mean, it could be a cracker of a game.
Darren, just quickly, what have you been seeing money for? Which market's been popular? It's going to be difficult for any side to win a Grand Slam. So has that been, something that hasn't attracted much money compared to maybe other markets?
Certainly on the outright, we've seen a decent split of money because Ireland are so short. They're maybe not as attractive as they have been in the past. So we have seen a good balance of money on coming in for Wales and Scotland as well, and England. So we've seen a fair balance of bets for the outright.
Okay, we're going to go to a break, and afterwards we're going to give our best special bets for the tournament.
Success ain't earned, it's bought. That's why at Paddy Power, we paid the big bucks for the best tech nerds in the world to develop our new fastest ever app. Download the new app from the App Store or Play Store now. 18+, begambleaware.org.
Now, Darren, Paddy Power have got a fantastic array of special bets for this tournament. You can bet on virtually anything you could imagine. Have you got maybe a couple for us that you like yourself?
Yeah, well, in the top try scorer market, we're offering a massive 7 places at a fifth compared to the general industry are offering 4 places. So we're being very, very generous here. So obviously there's going to be a bit of value in this market. For me personally, Rory Best, I think there's prices out there at about 250 to 1. We're 66 to 1 on this. He's going to be at the back of an Irish Mull who are getting over the line, and as we've seen with Sean Cronin for Leinster, he's already picked up 6 tries in the Champions Cup. Our Best is going to be at the back of a similar strength Mull here, so I just think he's a great each way bet in that market. If you're looking at a slightly more realistic chance of winning the top try scorer market, I'd look at Billy Vunipola. We currently have him priced at 33 to 1. There's 50 to 1 available on that. If he can go injury free, he's going to be England's key player. He's going to be at the back of the scrum, 1-on-1 with the 10. And as you saw in the Glasgow game, he'll just run over them. So I think he's a cracking bet in that market.
Now, Graham, obviously you're doing this for the Racing Post pull-out coming up, but can you give us a few snippets of the way you're thinking in the specials markets?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing about the try scorer market, because Rory Best, Sean Cronin, will probably come off the bench. They're an interesting one. Hookers in general are quite interesting in this market. Stuart McInally of Scotland has bagged a few. I don't know if he's going to be playing it. Guillaume Gerardo is the French hooker. He's got 4 tries in the Autumn Internationals. Where they come from, I don't know. Maybe looked at the rest of his team and thought, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to have to do it. But it's a bit difficult at the moment because we don't know with a lot of teams who's going to be lining up, especially in the back 3. And that applies especially to Wales. I do fancy Liam Williams, if he's fit again, to do well. He did well in the autumn, 3 tries. He's in good form at Saracens. He's got broken fingers at the moment. Now, he might just strap him up and go out and play. Even if he misses the France game, I don't think that's the end of the world, because I think we've sort of said that's going to be a bit of a low-scoring grind. It will have him fresh for Italy the following week. So he's quite an interesting one to look at. Although I mentioned Gerardo, the French hooker, another interesting one. Again, we don't know how France are going to line up. But Gaël Fickou is back in the squad. I don't think he'll get into the centres where he normally plays, but he might just get a place on the wing. and if he does, he scored a lot of tries in the Six Nations. I would go for him for top France try scorer rather than tournament, because I don't think France will score a lot of tries. But again, that's quite good because you might only need to get 2 or 3 to be your nation's top try scorer.
Stuart, great breadth of markets from Paddy Power on the specials. There must be something in there that's attracting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of the individual nation top try scorer market, Stuart Hogg for Scotland caught my eye. I have a theory here. Well, it's not so much a theory, it's more the Brian O'Driscoll factor repeated. So obviously when Stuart Hogg first came into the Scotland team, much like Brian O'Driscoll, set World Rugby alight, scored a lot of tries. Then teams went, well, we just need to double, treble mark him out of the game. Then for Brian O'Driscoll, what happened first of all was Jordan Murphy came in at fullback. He had then an option on one side. Then when Gordon Darcy came into the team and he had a seriously talented open field runner on his inside as well, a threat on both sides of Brian O'Driscoll meant teams had to give him more space because they couldn't just load up on him. And I think Hugh Jones does the same thing for Stuart Hogg. Hogg's had some decent wingers outside him for a while now. Scotland have some actual depth on the wing, and that helped Hogg, but teams, because they're outside him, you can just drift from Hogg onto them. The fact that Hugh Jones tore the Six Nations up last year, he was incredible, and teams have to adjust. They have to play to stop Hugh Jones just walking through them. And the reason there was such a big gap for Hugh Jones is because everyone was so keen to load up on Stuart Hogg. The fact that they're going to have to pay Hugh Jones more respect makes more space for Hogg. You give that guy half an inch and he can do amazing things with it. So yeah, Stuart Hogg in the Scotland top try scorer market, I think, is a cracking bet, and I wouldn't put anyone off playing him in the tournament top try scorer market either.
Right, one question to each of you before we get your naps. Darren, over to you first. Who wins the tournament, and will there be a Grand Slam? Just 2 words.
Wales and no.
Graham?
Probably Ireland, but at the prices I'll say Wales and no.
Stuart?
What Graham said, probably Ireland, but at the prices Wales and no.
Okay, so we're moving towards naps time.
This will not be beaten.
Darren, over to you. We're going to start. What's your best bet? What is your nap of the tournament?
My nap of the tournament is Greg Laidlaw in the Six Nations top point scorer. I know I kind of riffed into him a bit earlier and said he shouldn't be starting for Scotland, but he will be. He's their captain. So I think we're 7-1 on him in this market. There's 10-1 available. I think that's a brilliant bet, mainly because Sexton and Farrell at the front end of the market, there's 2 injury concerns around them. Then the Welsh, Halfpenny's going to be missing the first couple of games, but he will come in and he'll be taking the kicks there. Then you're looking at Morgan Parra. Now, I usually like going for the French in this market. They've won the top point scorer in the last 2 Six Nations have been French, which is really interesting. But I just think with Dupont, Saran, and even Machino potentially coming back in there, Parra's not going to play all the games. So I just think Greg Laidlaw is going to be the mainstay there. So that's why he's my nap at the tournament.
Graham, over to you. Your nap.
I'm going to go more straightforward. At the top of the table, I think Wales and Ireland in either order. So dual forecast, Wales, Ireland. I said probably Ireland. You could get a bigger price for Ireland Wales straight forecast, but you'll be sick if Wales actually do it. So I think it's about 5-2, the dual forecast.
And Stuart, the final word goes to you.
Yeah, my nap of the tournament is also Greg Laidlaw in the top point scorer market. It's one of those, it looks ripe for it, as we've highlighted. France have won it the last twice, but you can have absolutely no confidence who's going to be kicking goals for them or if it's going to be the same person throughout the tournament. It's the same with Wales. You're not quite sure who's going to be starting at fly half, and whoever gets the nods is probably going to be replaced by Halfpenny halfway through. Johnny Sexton has injury doubts, plus Joey Carberry is forcing his way out of that massive shadow. He's going to get some game time, and he could even start against Italy, so that makes it hard for Sexton. That leaves you Farrell at the head of the market, and he is an obvious shout. He deserves to be favourite. I think the thing for Farrell is, one, he's carrying the injury into the tournament. Secondly, referees are going to be all over him in this tournament. His shoulder charging / tackling is been under a lot of scrutiny, and he could miss game time because referees are going to be watching him very closely. Laidlaw is crucial to Scotland in terms of their game management, and he realistically, like Ali Price is a fantastic player, but Greg Laidlaw is sort of the beating heart of this Scotland team. I can't see him missing too many minutes. And if you narrow it down to what is effectively has the potential to be a 2-horse race, he's a 10-to-1 shot, and I just think that's a cracking price.
Okay, well, thank you, Darren, thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Graham, for this podcast. That's all we have time for today. Don't forget, if you enjoy these shows, make sure you rate, review and subscribe wherever you're listening to us. If you enjoyed the show, then the good news is there'll be a weekly rugby postcast during the Six Nations featuring Stephen Ferris and Ryle Nugent, so make sure you tune in for that. Also, don't forget to catch up with our anti-post Cheltenham postcast. Maddie and the team looked at the Ryanair, the Ballymore and the Supreme this week, well worth a watch. Bruce is back on Thursday and Friday for the football and racing betting previews, and later today, Mark Webster is in for a preview of Sunday's Super Bowl in the NFL, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, good luck with your betting and goodbye.
Follow Paddy Power on Snapchat. The username is ThePaddyPower, and we promise there won't be any boring snaps about gigs, the weather or the gym.